I'm Micah Smith, and this is our Week 2 challenge page solution. So this is the supply chain management tutorial. If you did not get a chance to watch the intro video and see anything about how to do this challenge, you may want to check that out first, just in case you want to try the challenge on your own. But we're going to be going through every step as to how to build this solution, how we can complete this challenge, and then we'll talk about some different ways that you can speed it up to make it go even faster. Okay? So let's jump right in. I'm logged into the Community Edition, so I'm going to maximize that here. I'm logged into Community Edition. I haven't built this bot yet, so we're going to build it here together. I'm going to first navigate down to the automation section here. And I'm going to go, so by default it takes you into bots. I created last time a folder called Bot Wars. That's just, so that I can keep these kind of organized. So I would suggest creating the same or something similar, someplace where you can keep this. But I'm going to create a new bot here. And I'm going to call this one Supply Chain Challenge, and then hit Create and Edit. So my key for solving any of these challenges, and this isn't just for challenges, this is for any bot, but is to always map out exactly what you want to do before you start building it, right? And that way we can kind of map out that framework of how we want the bot to work and how we want different things to be done. And then we go back through and put our code in. And that way, if you're doing this in segments, like you can't do it all in one day, you kind of have an outline of where you need to pick up and work. And it's a good way to kind of force you to do some level of documentation. So I'm going to talk through this process real quick, and then we'll go and build out kind of a framework for what we'd want to do here. So this is the challenge page. Obviously, one thing we need to do is launch this challenge page, so we'll make sure we take care of that. But with the challenge, there are a total of 7 purchase orders here that are provided, right? 7 PO numbers. So we're going to need to extract all of those at some point. But for each purchase order, we need to head to this Procurement Anywhere app. And I've got that open on this tab. We're going to have to log into this. So that's one thing we're going to have to take care of. And then for each of those purchase orders, we're going to have to do a lookup here to figure out, like, hey, here's my purchase order. I'll put this in here. I need to extract some of these details. I need to grab the state, I need to grab the ship date, and I need to grab the order amount. And so we're going to have, in some way, some kind of loop where we're going to fill in the purchase orders. We're going to extract that data, and we're going to come back here to fill some of that in. Now, what we saw here is that I can fill in the ship date directly. I can fill in the order total almost directly. Notice here that it does say I have to strip out that $sign. But for the assigned agent, I do have a little bit of work I have to do. So for the example we just looked at, this state, the ship to state for my buyer, is in Colorado. So I'm going to have to come to my agent territory spreadsheet. So if I download that and open it up, and I've got a copy open right here, so we'll just, through the magic of editing, move that over. I've got my spreadsheet here, and I'm going to maximize this a little bit more so you can actually read it. But our bot will need to go through and find that state. So ours was just Colorado, so it's CO, right? We have to go find that state and then find the corresponding agent who we need to assign that to. In this case, it's Mitch Manders. So I'm going to minimize this, and our assigned agent in this case would be Mitch Manders. Okay, so there's a couple things that our bot needs to do. It's got to log into that Procurement Anywhere. It's got to strip out all of these PO numbers so that I can actually read those. It's got to read the data from this page so I can fill out some of this form. And then it has to read where the state matches an agent so that I can fill out this dropdown. Okay, so that's kind of the general process of what we want to automate here. And one other thing I'll point out is that we are using XLSX this time. So last time we were using a CSV. That was for our customer onboarding challenge. In this case, we're going to be using an XLSX file. So we're going to try to automate all of that. So let's go get started with putting out an outline. So the first thing I want my bot to do, and we're just going to do this with steps because that's what I always suggest to do, is start with the step stuff. I'm going to drag my first step here, which is going to be download. Scoot my keyboard over. Download agent territory. Let's just put download spreadsheet. I keep looking over at my other screen here because I've got the page up, so I'm trying to make sure that I remember all of our points. download spreadsheet. So that's our first thing. The next thing we need to do is we want to log into that procurement anywhere. So I'm going to say login to PA app. Okay. Cool. So once we've got that, we've got our spreadsheet. We want to read our spreadsheet. Let's just do that all here. We'll do download and read all in that same step. We'll log into our Procurement Anywhere app. We will launch challenge page. And if you remember in our rules that we talked about for the intro to this, we said, hey, your bot as a part of its execution has to log into that Procurement Anywhere app every single time. That's fine. We're doing that. We know that the challenge page itself will start keeping track of time as soon as we've actually loaded the page. So by doing our login to Procurement Anywhere beforehand, we're shaving a little bit of time off. Again, that's just like kind of for this exercise. That's not something that you really have to learn from, like to apply that to another bot build. But the main thing to learn here is that we want to make sure that we've got an order to everything that we're doing. We're kind of mapping those things out. Okay, so with our challenge page, at that point, I'm going to need to read through the PO numbers. And I'm going to do a loop for that. So we're going to say loop through POs. And I'll show you exactly how we could approach doing that. You know, obviously, since we have, I'm going to drag this back over, 7 total purchase orders, right? I could go through and do each of these fields one by one. But if this were a variable page and sometimes there's 7 and sometimes there's 9, that's not going to work great. It's also going to be a ton of work. If I have to go through and do like a specific recorder action for each one of these, that's going to take me a while. So we're going to do it the kind of, I would say the lazy way is we're going to loop through those POs. Now, for every single purchase order that we loop through, we need to do 3 things. We need to read PO number. We need to look up PO number. 4 things, I guess. I thought of another one. We need to find agent, we'll say. Find agent. That's going to be us looking up that agent's or the state in our state assignment CSV or XLSX, sorry. And then the last thing we're going to do is fill the form. Right? And these last 4 steps that we just added, those are all going to kind of be stuff that we do in every iteration of our loop. And then the last thing we'll have to do is obviously click a button to submit. And then finally we can do like a cleanup step, because I always like to have those at the end where we can close out the XLSX file, maybe close the Procurement Anywhere app. I probably won't mess with that though. All right, so I'm going to zoom back into normal so you actually can read this. The first thing we're going to do is download that spreadsheet. Now, in the last lab, right, there's 2 ways we could do that. We could download this. One is we could have the bot just click this. But if we do that, then this page has to be open first. So what I'm going to do is right click on this button and say copy link address. And this is slightly different to the way we did the customer onboarding challenge, but that's fine. So I'm going to go up to the browser package here, and I'm going to say download file. And I'm going to give it this address. And this works because this button is actually an A tag. So it's a link that's made to look like a button. If it was a button that was kind of a normal HTML button and it was going to generate the file for me on the back end and then send it to the front end and then the file would download, I wouldn't be able to do it this way. But because this is a link, we can get away with it. I'm going to save this to ctemp. I always like to save stuff to ctemp, not in any kind of user directory, because I like my bots to be agnostic to the user. Meaning that if this were running under your account or running under my account or running under someone else's account, that the bot should still work the same way. And so as long as it's not built into the context of like, oh, it's got to go to downloads and then Micah Daniel Smith, or it would be the other way around, Micah Daniel Smith and then downloads, I don't want that. So I'm going to always keep these in kind of a generic directory. I like to use ctemp. Really, we should be using like a different subdirectory here, but for right now, that's fine. So we said we're going to download spreadsheet. We also want to read the spreadsheet here as well. Now, because this one is Excel, we talked about that We can't use our normal CSV TXT package. You could use Excel Advanced if you happen to have Excel installed on your local machine, but we're going to work off of the assumption that you don't have Excel installed. So we're going to do all of this with Excel Basic. If you have Excel installed, you could use the Excel Advanced package and you could do the same things. We're going to do this with Excel Basic. So that means that if my bot runner were to execute this bot for me, it doesn't have to have Excel installed. And again, when we're thinking about like the total cost of ownership for our OPA program, this is a huge win for us because we don't have to have Excel or we don't have to have Office installed on every single one of our bot runners in this particular use case. So I try to use Excel Basic wherever I can. All right, we're going to do Excel Basic and then open. It's going to ask us, hey, what file do you want to open? I'm going to actually copy the path right here because I haven't run this yet, so I don't even have this file in my ctemp directory. So I'm just going to place that in here in the desktop file field. If we go back and look at our sheet, it does contain a header, right? So we've got state here and full name. So I'm going to check that box. It is a, let's see, sheet. We only have one sheet, so we're good there. As far as read write, we only really need to read it. So I'm going to leave that as read only. And then obviously the session name is something to be paying attention to. If you're opening more than one Excel spreadsheet, you'd want to have different session names for each so that as you're closing one or doing some kind of operation on another, you know exactly what session you're talking about. Because we only have one here, that's going to be default. I'll hit save. So at this point, we have our spreadsheet downloaded and we've got a session that's established with opening and reading that spreadsheet. The next thing we need to do is log into our Procurement Anywhere app. And just like we did last time, I'm going to shortcut this process a little bit because here's what it looks like, right? We've got email address, a password, and a sign in to click. So that's 3 actions. We'll show off a little bit and we'll use the recorder for that. So I'm going to come over here to start recording and it's going to prompt me for what kind of recorder I want to use. I'm going to be using Universal Recorder. I'll refresh here to make sure it knows about all my windows. And this one is called PO Tracking Login. So I'm going to click Universal Recorder. It's going to move the focus of my screen to this page. And just like we would do with a normal recorder step, I can see some red boxes being drawn everywhere. So I'm going to highlight over the email address. For right now, I'm just going to type email here. Okay, because I don't remember the username. I also don't remember the password. So I'm going to click right there and type password. Oops, let me click again, sorry. Password, and then I'm going to click the sign in button. Okay, so obviously that didn't work because I didn't put in the real details, but I don't really care. I'm just going to hit finish here. And we will fill in those real details later. So I'm going to copy those steps. We've got 4 of them. It must have had an extra click someplace. With those highlighted, I'm going to Control X to cut. And I'm going to move back up here to my login to PA app. And I'm going to paste those right in there. So my first one is setting text for my email address. Notice that I had put email in there as the word. If we go back to the exercise page with the instructions right here, the username is admin@procurementanywhere.com. So I'm going to copy that and I will paste that right into here. And we should be good. And again, the object properties we have here, you may not be able to see that because of where my head is, but the object properties are just telling us everything that we know about this particular object. We don't really need to do anything with it for these, just pointing that out. And our next one, which was just another set text. So I'm going to delete this one. I must have clicked it twice accidentally. This one is for our password. It's a set text as well. Notice that it has a yield sign, and that's Automation Anywhere trying to tell us like, hey, don't put just a plain text password in here because this looks like it's probably a password field. So it's encouraging us to use the credential vault. Because this is just a lab and we're just kind of learning and playing around here, I'm not going to actually use a credential for this. I'm going to copy the password right here, which is pay pack ship with an exclamation here. So I'm going to copy that guy, and fill that in as an insecure string. And again, it's giving us just another warning to say like, hey, this is not encrypted, so just be really careful with this. Again, because it's just a lab or exercise page, we're fine with that. All right, and then the last one, I will just confirm, should be a click on that sign in button, and it looks like it is. Cool, so we're good. And that's just a click as the action. So at this point, we should be able to download the spreadsheet and log into our Procurement Anywhere app. The last thing we need to do, so here it says launch challenge page. And actually, let's move this one. Thinking I might want to move the loop through POs. They're not really dependent. Well, I guess they're dependent on launching the challenge page. All right, that's fine. Let's keep going. So launch the challenge page. I'm going to copy the URL for the challenge page. Again, I know you probably can't read it on my screen. It's in the description and the text below. So you can copy that exact same thing. But I'm going to copy that URL. I will move that over here. And we'll go back to the browser package. And we will open. And browser, I'm going to set as Google Chrome. And then link to open is going to be the supply chain management page. And I'll hit save. Now, we've done a couple things so far. So what I'm going to do is close all of the windows that I had open. And let's close this one too. And I'm going to try and run my bot because I want to make sure, like, so far at least everything's working. When I'm doing real bot builds, I test incrementally like this. And that way I don't get down to like step 49 and I'm like, oh wait, most of this stuff isn't actually working. And so now I have a ton of rework to do. So that way, if there is an issue, I can catch it early on. And we have one. And I just realized what it is. Let's hit stop right here. We are missing, see where it says action capture? We're missing the step where we actually launch the Procurement Anywhere page. Close out of that. So what I'm going to do is go back here, and that's why you test. So I'm going to fill in that URL, and I'm going to get the URL for the Procurement Anywhere app because that's what we need to launch. So I'm going to copy that, and I'll close both of these. We forgot to put this open browser up here. We just went straight to login. So I need to hit open here. Again, I'm going to put my browser as Google Chrome, link to open right there as PO tracking link, which is for the Procurement Anywhere. And now let's go ahead and run it. And now we should have a success. So again, I did not actually do that on purpose, as much as that's going to seem like it was perfectly staged. That's why I test incrementally while I'm going through and doing my bot builds, because I want to make sure that the stuff that I'm setting up is going to work, and then I'm not going to run into some weird issue that I could have detected earlier on. So at this point, I've got my Procurement Anywhere app logged into. It happened right before I switched over to this page. And then I also have my, I don't know what we're going to call this, our challenge page open, right? So at this point, we need to start looping through our purchase orders so that we can start to read these and then do our lookups in the Procurement Anywhere web app. So I'm going to leave Procurement Anywhere open. I'm also going to leave my, actually, you know what? I'm going to leave these on this screen so you guys can all see it. And I'll just go back to this one. Okay. So we're good to go so far. We are now to the loop through the POs. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have a loop. And I'm going to put that right here. And I'm going to say, let's say 7 times, right? Because I know there's going to be 7 on here. I could probably do it a little bit more dynamically with some more work, where if I said like, hey, I'm going to count the number of times I find ship date on here, and then based on that, I'll determine how many times I want my loop to run or how many iterations of my loop. But for just a simple example, we're going to just hard code a 7 in there for right now. What we're going to do from there is we want all of this stuff that we just moved down. We want that inside of that loop. So I need to read the PO number, look up the PO number, stuff like that. The first thing we want to do is read that PO number. Now, how do I know that we're going to be able to figure this out with a loop? I don't know for sure, but we're going to try and do it. So I'm going to go down to my recorder, and capture step. I'm going to drag that over into the read PO number section. For my window, I'm going to select browser. I'll hit refresh one time to make sure I've got all my windows up there, and I only have a couple open. It's going to be this Automation Anywhere Labs Supply Chain Management. That's going to be the right window. And I'm going to click Capture Object. So I've got a bunch of fields here, obviously, that say PO number. I'm going to highlight this first one and click into it, right? So it drew the little red box around PO number, and then I clicked into that. Now I'm going to scroll as far as I can here so you can see some of these values, but I'm specifically looking at the object properties. Now I'm going to open up a notepad document just so that we can kind of discuss this, and this is exactly what I do when I'm really building stuff. So I'm going to say HTML ID, and I'm going to say DOM path. And let's put above that PO number 1. So I'm going to copy the HTML ID, which is right there. I'm going to copy the DOM path, which is right there. And then I'm going to do that same thing for field number 2. So PO number 2, let's go ahead and clear this out. And I will explain the method of my madness here in a second. But for right now, let's do another recapture object. And this time I'm going to highlight over PO number 2. Okay. And again, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom until I see the object properties, my HTML ID, put that in my document, and my DOM path. Put that in my document. Now, I can obviously start to see if there is a pattern here and if it's something I want to follow. And I can see right here that I've got my PO number, my HTML ID is an incrementing value that says PO number, and then it's the incrementing value of that particular instance of a PO number. So I've got PO number 1, PO number 2. The other pattern I can see is that it looks like this div right here is incrementing every time we go on, but it's incrementing by 2. So I could use that. This is going to be the easiest way for me to do it though, because I just have one number and it's incrementing by 1. So let's use this, and I'm going to show you how we're going to apply that. So let's go back here. I'm going to recapture back on purchase order number 1. Click on that one. Okay. Now, I'm inside of my loop here, right? And what we didn't do inside of our loop, or in our loop definition, was that I can assign a current value to a variable. So what I'm going to do is hit the create variable icon here. And I'm just going to call this one n counter. That's fine. So I did a lowercase n to prefix that it's a number, and then counter is the name. So I'm going to hit create and select. And if I come back here, the first time through my loop, I should know that my first iteration will be number 1. And so what I can actually do here is, instead of just having PO number 1 or multiplying that times 7 times, I can insert a variable here. So I'm going to do $n counter and put $. Now, it doesn't like that, because it says, hey, this is an invalid expression. And it's saying that because HTML ID is expected to be a string, not a number. So what I can do is I can convert this to a number on the fly. I can see I have $n counter $. Right before that final $, what I'm going to do is type .number, which is an uppercase N. And you can see it's highlighted here, right? The IntelliSense is suggesting some different options for me. I'm going to select that number.toString, and now it's okay, right? And so what it's going to look for is, the first time through my loop, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to look for a field with the, or I'm going to look for an object, I should say, with the HTML ID of PO number and then 1. And then the next time through my loop, it's going to look for an object with PO number and then 2. So it's going to iterate through that every single time. And that should allow me to always make sure that I'm finding the correct PO number that I want as I go through my loop. Now, if we're going to customize the object properties like this for a recorder path, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to uncheck some of these properties because I don't want the recorder to consider them anymore. I'm going to uncheck the DOMX path. I'm also going to uncheck the path variable, right? The reason I'm doing that is because I've just filled in what will be a dynamic HTML ID. That HTML ID will not match this exact DOMX path every single time we go through. So to avoid any confusion, I'm going to uncheck those boxes. And that's telling Automation Anywhere to not consider those as valid pointers to this particular object on this page as it goes through and plays back my action here. All right, so hopefully you're able to follow along with me. This is the same process I take when I'm trying to figure out if there's patterns on a page, if I'm automating some website and I want to keep scraping through different boxes or different tables that aren't actually tables but look like tables. This is an approach you can take. All right, the action to take. I want to get property. Now I have to give a property name here. If you don't know all valid property names off the top of your head, a good way to figure that out is to click on this object properties. And if I scroll down through the different object properties, I want to find where the value is that actually represents that PO number. And I can see that HTML space value, I'm going to right click and copy that, actually has the PO number in it. And so that's the property that I want to extract as I go through this every single time. And notice it did put a couple, like a tab or indentation there, so I'm going to get rid of that. But I want this to read exactly like the object property name itself. So it should say HTML space value, and that will allow me to extract that value from that input field, which is a read-only field. All right, the last thing I want to do, and I know my face is covering this, is to save the outcome to a variable. So I'm going to hit the plus sign next to that and create a new variable. And I'm going to call this S because it's a string, so I'm going to preface it with a lowercase s. And I'm going to call this one current PO. And I'm calling it current PO because this value I'm going to use, or this variable I'm going to use over and over again throughout my loop. So I'll hit create and select and hit save. All right, that was a lot of work, but we just read a PO number 7 times, right? So we should be good there. We can quickly test this just to make sure it's going to work by going back here, and I'm going to add a message box right after reading that. And I'm going to just fill in that S current PO into my message box, and I'll close it after 5 seconds. All right. So what I can do, I will close that window here, this one, and you can just click right here on this button with the 3 ellipses on it and say run from here. And that allows you to execute your bot from a specific spot within the entire list of commands. This will only work as long as you're outside of a loop. Because I'm not inside of a loop already, it will work fine. I'm outside of a loop, so this should work fine. All right, so 3744, that looks like it's correct. The next one should be 8641. Good. So we can see that it's able to go through these and it's able to find, we'll let it go one more. All right, so I'm pretty confident that's working for us, right? We read them correctly. We read them in the order I was expecting. So we're good to go on that. And again, a good way to test just to make sure you know what you're getting yourself into as you're adding different logic to your bot. It says there was an error. It's because I canceled it, so that's fine. We'll close that. And I'll get rid of this message box because we don't want this in our final run. Look up the PO number. So we should have that window open still. If you didn't, just run your bot so it'll do the login and get you to this part. But at this point, I want to take that PO number that I just extracted. I want to fill that into the search, and then I'm going to read from the table that's returned. So how we're going to do that? I'm going to add a recorder action here. So recorder capture for my lookup PO number. For my window, I'm going to select browser, and then on the drop down, I'll select the previously selected. No, actually, I want to select this one. Mine's called Automation Anywhere Labs PO Tracking Lookup. So that's the page. Let's make sure that's not the login. Yeah, that's correct. And I will hit Capture Object. So I'm going to highlight over the search box here. Notice it's got like a very slight red box around it. I'll click right in there. And just like we did with our read-only field that we were using before, it's going to capture everything that it knows about that particular object. So it's got, what div it's in. In this case, we don't have an HTML ID on that object, so it's found it based on the DOM-X path and the path. For the action to take on that object, I'm going to select Set Text from the dropdown. And then it's going to say, hey, what text do you want to fill in there? I'm going to press F2. That will bring up my Variables Explorer. And I'm going to fill in the S current PO. And hit Yes, Insert. So that will fill in that PO number. Now, if we were to just simulate that real quick, I'm going to grab this first purchase order and then fill it in here. This is where our bot is expected to be at this point. So for our next step of using Recorder, I want to get it to a point where it's actually looking up a PO so I can see what that'll look like when the bot is actually filled in a search criteria here. So I'm going to, I've got that filled in. I'm going to hit save here because I'm good on that lookup, just doing the lookup. Now I need to read the values. So I'm going to drag another capture action here. Again, I'm going to select browser. I'm going to select Automation Anywhere Labs PO Tracking Lookup and hit Capture Object. Now this time we want to actually read a value from this table. Now notice that I can't actually go down to the cell level using Recorder. All I'm able to do is just select that this is an HTML table. So I'm just going to click that. And what we're going to see is that because I've selected a properly tagged HTML table, I have a bunch of different actions that I can take on that object. So I can get a property, I can get the entire table and return that as a table. I could get a specific cell, I could get all cells, I could get a specific row. What we're going to do is we're going to extract just the cells that we need and we'll save those out to variables. Okay? So I'm going to say get cell, let's see, what do we want to do? Get cell text by index. That's what we want to do, right? Because we want to say, all right, if I go to the, and let's look at an example here. We want to get the state because it's the first one that comes up. I'm going to go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column and the second row, and that should be the state. So if I fill that in, row is going to be 2. Oops, sorry, I hit F2. Row is 2. Column is going to be 5 in our case, right? Because I just counted those out. It's 1 based. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the state. And scrolling down to the very bottom, I'm going to click that save outcome to a variable. I'll click the plus sign to create a variable. I'm going to call this one S current state. Just like we did for the PO, this variable is going to be used over and over again once per iteration through our loop. And hit save. All right, let's do one more of those. And what I'm going to do is actually copy this one. So I'm going to click on it. You can see it's highlighted here. Control C, Control V. That will allow me to clone that. And really, I don't need to redo anything except telling it where to read the value from. So it's still going to be row 2. But this time I want to read the ship date. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as my column. So I'll fill that in. For my variable, again, I'm going to create a new one. And that's going to be S current date, I believe is what we did. And then I'll copy this one more time and paste it on there, because we need to read the order total. So that one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is our order total. So column 8, row 2. And we're going to save that to a variable. Again, I click that plus sign to create a new variable here. I'm going to call this S current order total and hit create and select. Now I'll hit save. Now at this point, we've read our PO number. We've extracted all of the details from that PO tracking page. Now there was one other clue that we pointed out when we went through this originally. We said that all order totals need to be submitted as numbers only, no dollar signs. So while we're extracting this value, let's also clear out that dollar sign. So we're going to use a string action here So I'm going to go to the string package, and I'm going to say replace. And I'll give a source string, and my source string in this case, I'm going to press F2, is going to be S order total, current order total. My find string, I'm going to put a $sign. Now, I can't just put $1 because a $sign is a prefix for a variable in Automation 360. So I'm actually going to put $2 And I know that may not make immediate sense, but really the first $sign becomes an escape character. The second $sign is what we're actually looking for. So we're going to be looking for a $sign. I have the option to replace that with something. In this case, I want to replace it with nothing because I want to get rid of that $sign. So in my final option here, I can assign the output to a variable. I'm going to select current order total. So basically, I'm reading that value. I'm seeing if there's a $sign in it, get rid of the $sign and replace it with nothing, and then fill that back into the same variable. So I'm assigning it back to itself. We'll hit save. All right, so we've got all of our data. We've got most of our data. The next thing we need to do is find the agent. So we have the state already, but we have to find where the agent is, like what the agent's name is based on that state. So I'm going to minimize that real quick. We need to go to our Excel basic actions, okay? And this is really the tools that we have to be able to solve this problem. Now, there's probably a couple ways you could do this. You could technically loop through all of them and like wait until you find a match in that first column and then work accordingly. I think that's probably not the most efficient way to do it. So I'm going to grab this find action. I'm going to drag that over. And I can search from the beginning to the end, or I could search by specific cells, right? So like if I wanted to only search in column A, I think it's A. Is it 1 or A? Yeah, column A, I could do that. I'm going to say beginning to end, so that would be full sheet. For my find, I'm going to press F2 here, and that's going to be S current state, because that's what I'm looking for. Now, immediately, if you're an experienced programmer, you would say, well, what if one of these people's names happens to also match a state code, right? MA for Manders, I think. MA is a state code, right? We don't want to run into a situation where I've accidentally read this MA when I'm trying to read this MA. So the way that we can handle that is I can say match entire cell contents. And that means I'm only counting this match as a valid match if the entire cell matches what I'm looking for. And so that way it's okay for me to say beginning to end because I'm matching the entire cell contents. Alternatively, I could have said only look in this first column and then match entire cell contents. Wouldn't have been as important. Because we're doing states, because it's only 2 characters, we only have 2 columns here, this will work totally fine. But you may have to play around with that when you're doing another use case, like a real use case for your work, where you have to match some kind of contents. Now, when this comes back to us, and I hit the plus sign on the assign cell addresses to variable, it's going to come back to us as a list. And the reason is in case it found multiple matches, it's going to return those as a list to us. So it's expecting to find possibly more than one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say the L matched row. I'm just going to call it matched row as single. I know that I only have 1 entry per state. So I should never be coming up with more than 1 match. So the list isn't really going to matter a whole lot for us. But if I had, multiple people listed per state, or if the state was just 1 determinant factor, but I also had like zip codes and I had broken that up further, this could get more complex. I'm going to leave it as L matched row for right now, and that's going to return to me just the row where I have basically the cell address where I have the match of the state code that I just looked up. Now, from there, I want to say get row number. Because ultimately what I need to know the row number so that I can extract whatever is in column B, which is the person's name. So get row number, I'm going to say get specific cell, right? Because it's not the active cell. I don't know what's going to be active right now. I'm going to work off specific cell. And it's going to ask for a cell address, okay? We're going to point to that list that we just created and the first element of that list. So I'm going to hit F2 here. And I will select L matched row, and my list index is going to be 0. So whatever is in that very first row of our list, which we're only going to ever have 1, that's the cell we're going to be looking for to return the row number. Following along with me so far? All right. So I'm going to hit the plus sign on the save the row number to local variable, and it's going to actually save that row out as a string. So I'm going to set s matched, let's say found row number. That's not a great variable name because I already have matched row and found row. But I'm going to use s found row number here to get single cell. Okay, so what we've done is we've found where that state code is in our Excel spreadsheet. We figured out what row it is, because that's really the important thing. We probably could have figured out the row a different way by like doing some regex with our returned cell based on the current state, but I didn't want to do it that way because I think it's a little too complex. This is an easier way to do it, is just to get that matched row. All right, get single cell. Now we'll say specific cell. It's going to be in column B because I want to get the person's name, right? And then it's going to be my matched row. So it's going to be, my found row. So S found row number. And so just so that we can kind of talk through this, if it found CT, right, it's going to say, oh, well, that was in row 8. I'm going to look at B8, and that's going to be Tim Langer. That would allow me to return the contents of that cell to a variable. I'm going to call this one S current agent and hit create and select. And at this point, we would have looked up that state in our Excel spreadsheet, found the matching row, and then found whatever is in column B, which is our agent side. We would have filled that into a variable based on our found row. All right, we've got that part done. Now we have the fun part, which is to fill the form. So I'm going to open this back up. It's only 3 fields we have to fill out for each one of these. So I'm just going to use it with regular recorder instead of recording up here. I'm just going to do it with our capture steps here. So again, I'm going to select browser. This time it's going to be back to my supply chain management app. I'll hit capture object. And I'm going to highlight over ship date. Okay. Now, just like we had before, we can see that there's a pattern that's established. And I don't know if you can see this because of my head, but it says ship date 1, right? I'm going to recapture object, and I want to go down to this next ship date and just make sure these follow the pattern. But I'm pretty confident we can just keep iterating through these. Yeah, ship date 2. So we can just keep iterating through these by incrementing that same number that we're already using, our counter value. So what that means is I've gone back, I've done a recorder on ship date 1. I'm going to customize the object properties like we did before to uncheck the box for DOM-XPath. I'm going to also uncheck the box for path. I don't want those to be considered as criteria for finding this particular object. And then for my HTML ID, I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to delete the hard value of 1. I'm going to type in counter, and then this is just going to be dot uppercase N number, and I've got toString here. I'm going to select that. And then the action to take, we forgot to do that part. So my action to take up here is going to be set text. And what text do I want to set? That's going to be F2 and current date, S current date. Pretty sure that's a field, right? Yeah, S current date. To save a little bit of time, I won't shortcut it. All right, let's do the same thing again. Capture step, browser, select from the drop-down, supply chain management, capture object, my order total. So we'll do these in a slightly different order. My action to take is going to be set text. My keystrokes, I'm going to press F2 again, and that's going to be S current order total. And then just like we did before, oops, clicked wrong there. I want to go into the object properties. I'm going to uncheck the DOM-XPath. I'm going to uncheck the path, and then I'm going to set the order total to get rid of the 1, and then I'll do $in counter dot number to string. All right, one more of those, and then we should be in good shape to do our final click, which is the submit. So I'm going to go to browser. I'm going to select supply chain management. I'm going to capture object. This one's a drop-down, so I'm going to highlight over that assigned agent drop-down. And if I scroll here, the action to take on object. Again, because this is a drop-down, I do have different actions I can take here. This one we're going to say select item by text, and then the text value that I want to select there is going to be my current agent name. So that's going to be S current agent, and again that's coming directly from our XLSX file. And then finally on our object properties here, just like we did before, I'm going to uncheck DOM-X path. I'm going to uncheck path. And then in my HTML ID, I'll do the same thing, which is going to be $in counter dot number to string. Okay. So if we did this all correctly, I'm going to minimize some of these so we can talk here for a second. Minimize PO number. If we've done that correctly, for each of these, we will read the PO number, we will look up the PO number, we will find the agent, and then we will fill the form. Once those are taken care of, the last thing we need to do for that page is one more capture step. And I'm going to put this one outside of our loop. Okay? Outside of the loop. Because what we need to do is select, click that button at the very bottom of the page, which is to submit. And that submit click should only happen once. So that's why I want it to be outside of my loop. That's only going to happen once at the very end after all 7 PO numbers have been taken care of. My action to take is going to be a click. I'll leave all of the default object properties there because this isn't going to be a dynamic element, and hit save. All right, the last thing I can do for my cleanup, let's do 2 things. We will close our spreadsheet from the Excel basic. It says, do you want to save the changes? We open it in read only, so that really doesn't apply, but I'm going to hit uncheck that box. And then I'm also going to, we'll do 3 things. Let's log out of the Procurement Anywhere app. So I'm going to switch back to my PO tracking, capture object. I'm going to click this log out button. And then the last thing we'll do is I'm going to delete that spreadsheet. So on my file, I can select to delete. And specific path, I'll go up to the very top here where I had my spreadsheet download path right there. This one's really overkill. You don't have to delete it. I'm just doing that because we're cleaning up the machine after we left it. Oh, sorry, I forgot for our log out, I'm going to click here. We'll hit save. All right, moment of truth. Let's close all of these other windows we had open here. And let's go ahead and let this run and let's see what happens. So I think that we took care of everything that I can think of right now. We'll see if it works. I'm pretty confident it will. It's downloading the file right now. I still have the file open, but I have it open from another location. So if you had that Excel file open, you might want to close it. Mine was open from my downloads directory, so it's a little bit different of a problem here. All right, so it's going through, it's filling out those different fields right now. And at this point, we're just like a proud parent. We're watching to make sure that our bot that we've created is doing what we have raised it up and instructed it to do. It looks like it is at least filling in different agent names every single time, so that's a good sign. Let's see, did it actually hit submit? It did. Boom. 23.17 seconds. So that's a pretty good time. It's possibly faster than some other people you've seen just because like they did the login they opened this page and they did the login and they went back and forth. But again, share this on social media if you've completed it. If you've done it earlier, that's fine too. If you've done the tutorial, you can still share this, put it on social media, share a screenshot of your accomplishment, tag 3 other developers, challenge them to complete the exercise as well. Use the hashtags botgames and RPA August, and our social media team will be looking for people who have completed this and handing out swag packs throughout the month of August. So be sure to complete this and be sure to share that. Now, final thing I want to talk about, kind of like we did last time, which is like, what are some ways that this could be improved going from here? If I really wanted to go like crazy fast on this, what would I do? I think our steps of operation are pretty efficient, right? We're going through them in what I believe to be the most correct order that we could as far as efficiency. What you really could do if you wanted to go hyper fast on this is with some of these interactions with the Procurement Anywhere app and with the challenge page itself, you could consider doing some keystroke operations. Not for the Procurement Anywhere app, but possibly for the filling the form. You could consider doing some keystroke operations there to simulate keystrokes. Another option you could do is that, and you might have seen this from the session we had on Friday that was about bot store packages. You could, do I have it? I don't even have it here. Oh, never mind. Oh yeah, I'm in Community Edition. If you're on Enterprise Edition, you could be using the Web Automation package. The Web Automation package is a bot store package that allows you to basically use Selenium to automate a web browser. The downside is you can't also use Recorder on that same session. You can only use Selenium. So if you're going to use Web Automation package, you're going to use that the whole time. But that's another way you could do it. The other way that you could do it and still be finishing it on Community Edition is by using this run JavaScript action. And if within my, let's say, fill form, instead of me filling the form with Recorder, if I wanted to use run JavaScript here, I could actually select my same browser tab, which would be my PO tracking, and then I could enter my manual script here. So I could do like document, spell it right, dot query, query selector, and then I could, reference the ID for a specific object and then fill that in. And that would allow me to interact with the page using JavaScript. Now, because you can't actually fill a variable into this script field right here, and I know my fat head is probably in the way, but it says enter script here. What you'd really need to do is you would have to write out that JavaScript to a file, and then you would import existing file, and that way it would work through iterations within your loop. So that would be another way that you could do it to go even faster with the filling of the form. But again, as you go through and as you're creating automations either for the challenge page or for other stuff, take into consideration like, hey, I don't want to go faster than the app can, and I don't want to start to cause reliability issues with my bot because I made it so hyper fast that like it's going faster than pages are loading and things like that. So just keep that in mind as you're creating these automations, whether it's just for the challenge page or for real work. You don't want to go over the speed that the application is able to keep up with. Okay? So hopefully you had fun with this challenge. I know I had a good time putting this together, and this was a fun one to build. You get some experience using different applications. You get some experience using Excel, and you get some experience using the Excel basic package. So hopefully this is helpful for you. Be sure to join us tomorrow. We're going to be doing a live recap session of all of this week's events. We'll shout out some people who have had the fastest time for the Bot Wars Challenge. We'll also have another bot store video tutorial as well, so you don't want to miss that. And then next week, we'll be back with yet another Bot Wars Challenge, and it's going to get even harder from here. So make sure that you join us for that one. You're going to have a great time, and we're excited to see your times and your accomplishments and your speeds on social media. Okay? Thanks again for your time. My name is Micah Smith. Go be great.